Ladybird Storytime videos introduce a whole new range of children's programs. Well-loved tales and read-it-yourself stories.
Ah, I'm glad you could make it.
Each video has been devised by a top educational expert, and the stories are told by famous TV stars. With songs and activities, they offer first-class entertainment for children. Ideal for encouraging children to read, a free full-colour storybook is provided with every video. Let's take a closer look at some now. First, Jack and the Beanstalk. Ron Moody tells this classic story with the help of a few friends.
Heave-ho-fi-fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be alive or be dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread.
Una Stubbs presents the beautiful fairy tale Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Gave her no peace by day or by night. Mirror, mirror on the wall, among the ladies in this land, who is the fairest of them all?
Here's Bonnie Langford with Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Who are you?
My name's Goldilocks.
Well, you're a naughty girl, Goldilocks.
The story of Tom Thumb, a well-loved tale with Jan Francis.
He was called Tom Thumb because, well, can you guess? He was no bigger than a man's thumb.
Tim Brooke Taylor presents The Charming Princess and the Frog.
This time I'm going to tell you what happened when a very special princess met a frog. Yes, that's you.
Just as the clock struck midnight, the door of the workshop opened very quietly.
Elves and the Shoemaker, a read-it-yourself story starring Rula Lenska.
Ready? Now listen to the words.
Here's an example of the many songs specially composed for these videos.
1, 2, buckle my shoe.
The amazing Magic Paintbrush, presented and narrated by Andrew Sachs.
Well, soon people heard about Liang's magic pictures, and they came to see him paint. They looked on in amazement as Liang's paintings came to life.
With many other great videos in the series, including Town Mouse and Country Mouse, Sleeping Beauty, Pied Piper of Hamelin, Beauty and the Beast, The Sly Fox and the Red Hen, Thumbelina, Ugly Duckling, Gingerbread Man, Wizard of Oz, Cinderella, Puss in Boots, Little Red Riding Hood, and Dick Whittington. This fantastic range of videos are ideal for children between the ages of 3 and 6. Look out for these well-loved tales and read-it-yourself stories at all good video outlets.
you there? I'm Fairy Godmother Goodsocks. And I've come here, by magic, especially to see you. The only problem is that the magic isn't working properly. And I can't get to my full size. I wonder if that dog's had his breakfast yet. Oh, I must get on. But I can't do that till I get to my full size. Oh, what is that spell for making me grow taller? Oh, yes, I remember. Higgledy-piggledy. Here we go. Taller and taller. Let me grow.
That did the trick. I mean the magic. What do you mean, has it worked properly? This is my full size. Some of the most famous people in the world were small. Remember that, all you littlies. Now, let's go into the Great Hall. I've got a surprise for you lot. See, got here before me. I must have a word with that person doing your magic. I love this old house. Item Moat. It's a funny name, isn't it? Item Moat. And the reason I brought you here is that I want to tell you a story. A story about someone who lived a long time ago in a house almost as old as this one. Once upon a time... Oh, drat! That's a phone call from Fairyland. It's long distance to here, so it must be important. Excuse me. F.G. Goodsock speaking. F.G., Fairy Godmother. Oh, it's you. You know you're not supposed to phone me when I'm working. It's Bear. He's very, very naughty. But you can't help liking him. You want to hear the story too? Well, you're too late. Well, whose fault is that? If you want to come out with me, then you must get up in the mornings. You see, he's absolutely adorable, so you have to forgive him everything. All right. But then you have to get here by magic. Only do hurry. You're holding everything up. Well, honestly, Now really, Bear, this is too much. You're going to have to sit very still while I carry on. Now, where was I? Oh, yes, the story. Thank you. The story of Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a young girl called Cinderella. Her mother was dead, and she lived with her father and two elder sisters. Cinderella's elder sisters were beautiful, but because they were bad-tempered, their faces grew to look ugly. They were jealous of Cinderella because she was a lovely girl, and so they were often unkind to her. The ugly sisters made Cinderella do all the work in the house. She carried coal for the fire, cooked the meals, washed the dishes, scrubbed and mended the clothes, swept the floor, and dusted the furniture. She worked from morning till night without stopping. Cinderella not only did all the housework, but she helped her sisters to dress. She cleaned their shoes, brushed their hair, tied their ribbons, and fastened their buckles. The elder sisters had many fine clothes, but they were so bad-tempered that they still looked ugly. Cinderella had no fine clothes. All she had was an old grey dress and a pair of wooden shoes. In the evening, when she'd worked until she was weary, Cinderella had no bed to go to. She had to sleep by the hearth in the cinders. That was why her sisters called her Cinderella. And that was why she always looked dusty and dirty. Now, it happened that the king arranged a great feast for his son. The feast was to last 3 days, and on each evening there was to be a grand ball. All the beautiful young girls in the country were invited in order that the prince might choose himself a bride. Cinderella's sisters were invited to the feast, and they were so excited that they could talk of nothing else. Cinderella was not invited. As she was only seen in rags working in the kitchen, everyone thought that she was her sister's maid. On the evening of the first ball, Cinderella had to help her sisters to put on their new dresses and arrange their hair. Cinderella thought of how she would like to have a ball gown and go to the ball and see the prince. Tears began to run down her face. "What are you crying for?" asked the ugly sisters crossly. "I would like to wear a beautiful dress and go to the ball," replied Cinderella. "You? Oh, go to the ball?" laughed the sisters. "A fine sight you would be at the ball." And they pointed to her ragged dress and wooden shoes. When her sisters had left for the ball, poor Cinderella sat down and cried as if her heart would break. Suddenly, Cinderella heard a kind voice saying, "What is the matter, my dear?" She jumped up from her stool and turned to see who it could be. There stood her fairy godmother, smiling kindly at her. "I would like to have a beautiful dress and be able to go to the ball," said Cinderella. "I have never been to a ball, and I've never had a ball gown," she went on, "and I would love to see the prince." "And so you shall, my dear," said her godmother. "Dry your eyes and then do exactly as I tell you." Cinderella dried her eyes and smiled at her godmother. "First, I want you to go into the garden and bring me the biggest pumpkin you can find," said the fairy godmother. "Very well," said Cinderella as she ran off to the garden. She picked the biggest pumpkin she could find and took it to her fairy godmother. The fairy godmother touched the pumpkin with her magic wand. Immediately, it turned into the most beautiful carriage you can imagine. The outside was made of shining gold, and the inside was lined with red velvet. "Now, run and fetch me the mouse trap from the pantry," said the fairy godmother. "Very well," replied Cinderella as she ran off to the pantry. She found the mouse trap on the floor behind the pantry door. There were 6 mice in it. Cinderella brought the mouse trap to her godmother. One touch of the magic wand, and the door of the mouse trap flew open. Out ran the 6 mice, one after the other. As each mouse was touched by the magic wand, it changed into a fine grey horse. 6 fine grey horses to pull the golden carriage. "Next, run and fetch me the rat trap from the cellar," said the fairy godmother. "Very well," said Cinderella as she ran down the steps to the cellar. She found the rat trap with 1 rat in it and took it to her godmother. One touch of the fairy wand and the rat trap flew open and out ran the rat. The fairy godmother touched the rat with her wand and it changed into a smart coachman dressed in red livery trimmed with gold braid. "Lastly," said Cinderella's godmother, "I want you to run and bring me the 2 lizards that are behind the cucumber frame at the bottom of the garden." "Very well," said Cinderella as she ran into the garden. She looked behind the cucumber frame, and there she found 2 small lizards, which she brought to her godmother. Cinderella's fairy godmother touched the lizards with her fairy wand. They turned into 2 smart footmen, each dressed in red livery, trimmed with gold braid to match the coachman's livery. There was now a golden coach, lined with red velvet, drawn by 6 grey horses. There was a coachman in red livery to drive the coach, and 2 footmen, each in red livery, to open the door. Cinderella glanced down at her old grey dress and her wooden shoes. "One more touch of my magic wand, my dear," said her godmother. Then there happened the most wonderful magic of all. Cinderella found herself in a beautiful ball gown of pale pink silk. Its skirts spread wide, and there were tiny frills round the neck and down the front of the bodice. Cinderella's face was shining with joy. "Oh, thank you, godmother," she cried. "Thank you." "Enjoy yourself at the ball, my dear," said her godmother. "But there is one thing you must remember. You must be home before the clock strikes midnight. For on the last stroke of 12, the coach will become a pumpkin again, the horses mice, the coachman a rat, the footman lizards, and yourself the ragged girl you were." "I will remember," said Cinderella, as her godmother kissed her goodbye. The footman opened the door of the carriage. Cinderella sat down and spread out her skirts on the red velvet cushions. The coachman touched the horses with his whip, and they were off to the ball. Sit still. When Cinderella arrived at the palace, she looked so beautiful that the ugly sisters did not know her. They thought she must be a princess from another country. They never thought of Cinderella, for they believed that she was sitting at home by the cinders. The prince thought that he had never seen such a beautiful princess. He came towards Cinderella, took her hand, and danced with her. All evening he would dance with no other maiden, and he never let her out of his sight. If anyone else came to invite her to dance, the prince said, "This is my partner." Cinderella had never spent such a wonderful evening in her whole life, yet she still remembered her godmother's warning. At 11:45, she left the ballroom while the other guests were still dancing. Her carriage was waiting for her, and she was driven quickly home. She arrived at the door just as the clock was striking 12. On the last stroke of midnight, the coach became a pumpkin, the horses mice, the coachman a rat, and the footman lizards. Cinderella's ball gown vanished, and she found herself once more in her old grey dress and wooden shoes. Cinderella sat down in the chimney corner to wait for her sisters. When they arrived home, they found Cinderella in her dirty clothes among the ashes, and a dim little oil lamp was burning on the mantelpiece. The ugly sisters could talk about nothing but the beautiful princess, who had looked far lovelier than any lady at the ball. They described her gown and her slippers. They spoke of how the prince had danced with her all evening, and how he would permit no other man to dance with her. Yet no one knew who she was. Cinderella listened to all this, but she said nothing. On the next evening, the ugly sisters went off to the second ball, leaving Cinderella sitting by the fire. No sooner had they gone than Cinderella's godmother appeared again. Just as before, her magic wand produced the golden carriage with its coachman and footman. This time Cinderella's ball gown was even more beautiful than on the first evening. It was made of pale blue satin, with floating overskirts of pale blue net embroidered with silver thread. Her pale blue slippers were embroidered in silver, and silver stars sparkled in her hair. Once more, Cinderella thanked her godmother, who reminded her to be home by midnight. When Cinderella arrived at the ball in the blue dress, everyone was astonished at her beauty. The king's son had waited until she came, and he instantly took her by the hand and danced with no one else but her. When others came and invited her to dance, he said, "This is my partner." Cinderella was so happy that she almost forgot what the godmother had told her. When at last she did remember to look at the clock, it was 5 minutes to 12. She left the prince and hurried out of the ballroom as quickly as she could. Cinderella's carriage was waiting for her, and they set off at speed. But they were only halfway home when the clock began to strike 12. On the last stroke of midnight, the carriage and horses, the coachman and footman vanished. Cinderella found herself in her old grey dress and wooden shoes. She had to run the rest of the way home as fast as she could. Even so, she had just seated herself on her stool by the cinders when her sisters returned from the ball. Once more, all the ugly sisters could talk about was the beautiful stranger with whom the prince had danced. On the evening of the third ball, Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared as soon as the ugly sisters had left. When her godmother had touched her with a magic wand, Cinderella found herself in a gown which was more splendid and magnificent than any she had yet had. It was made of silver and gold lace, which shimmered as she moved. Diamonds sparkled at her throat, and her golden hair was held high by a dazzling diamond tiara. On her feet were golden slippers. Cinderella was so delighted that she hardly knew how to thank her godmother. "Enjoy yourself, my dear," said her godmother, "but do not forget the time." When Cinderella arrived at the ball in her dress of silver and gold, she looked so magnificent that no one knew how to speak for astonishment. The prince danced with no one but Cinderella all evening, and if anyone invited her to dance, he said, "This is my partner." Cinderella was so happy that she forgot all about the time. Suddenly the clock began to strike 12. Cinderella was terrified that she would find herself in the ballroom in her old grey dress. She rushed out of the door in such haste that she lost her slipper. The prince ran after her and saw the slipper. It was small and dainty and all golden. By the time Cinderella reached the place where her carriage had been, it had disappeared, and she was in her old clothes. This time she had to run all the way home. The prince looked everywhere for her, but could not find her. He still did not know her name, but he had fallen in love with her, and he was determined to marry her. So the next morning, the prince took the golden slipper to his father, the king, and said, "No one shall be my wife but she whose foot this golden slipper fits." The king's herald was sent through the streets of the city, carrying the small golden slipper on a blue cushion. The prince himself followed the herald, hoping to find the lady with whom he had danced. Every lady who had been to the feast was eager to try on the slipper. Each one hoped that the slipper would fit her and that she would marry the prince. Many ladies tried to squeeze their feet into the slipper, but all their feet were too large for such a dainty shoe. At last the herald, followed by the prince, came to Cinderella's house. Each of the ugly sisters was determined to squeeze her foot into the tiny slipper so that she could marry the prince. But they both had large, ugly feet. Even though they struggled until their feet were bleeding, neither one could force her foot into the slipper. At last, the prince turned to Cinderella's father and asked, "Have you no other daughter?" "I have one more," replied the father, "but she's always in the kitchen." Then the ugly sisters cried out, "She's much too dirty. She cannot show herself." But the prince insisted, and so Cinderella was sent for. Cinderella first washed her hands and face, and then went to meet the prince. She seated herself on her stool, drew her foot out of the heavy wooden shoe and put it into the slipper. It fitted perfectly. When Cinderella stood up and the prince looked at her face, he knew it was the beautiful maiden who had danced with him. He cried out, "This is my true bride." At that moment, Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared and turned her once more into the beautiful princess. The old grey dress became a velvet gown. The prince lifted Cinderella onto his horse and rode away with her. The two ugly sisters were horrified to discover that Cinderella was the beautiful princess who had been at the 3 balls. They were so angry that they couldn't speak. At the palace, the king was glad to welcome his son's bride. He arranged a magnificent wedding for the prince and Cinderella. All the kings and queens, the princes and princesses in the land came to the wedding. The wedding feast lasted a whole week. And so, Cinderella and the prince lived happily ever after. Now, what's all this, dog? How silly of me. I almost forgot. Dog's reminding me that I want to read you another story. This time about 3 dogs, each one even bigger than him. What's that? Oh, yes. Yes. The story's also about 3 chests. They've got one here. Shall we go and find it? I'll race you. Oh. You've got here first again. Who is this person doing your magic? Poor Bear's getting quite exhausted trying to keep up with you. What's that, Bear? Yes, yes. That chest is like the one in the story. I've already said that. You must pay more attention. What's that? Could I please get on with the story? Well, honestly. He's so cheeky, that Bear. This story is called The Tinderbox. One sunny day, a soldier marched along the road. He had a sword at his side and a knapsack on his back, for he was coming home from the wars. On the way, he saw an ugly old witch. "Soldier, would you like a lot of money?" called the witch. "Very much," said the soldier. "What would I have to do?" The witch pointed to a big tree. "That tree is hollow," she said. "I want you to climb down inside. I'll tie a rope round your body and pull you up when you call. Then you'll be rich." The soldier looked puzzled. "But how?" he asked. "You will find 3 rooms down there," the witch told him. "There is a fierce dog with eyes as big as teacups in the first. He sits on a chest of copper coins. Don't worry about him. Spread my blue checked apron on the floor and lift him onto it. Then you may take as many coins as you wish. The second room holds a chest of silver coins," the witch went on. "Another dog with eyes as big as mill wheels sits there. Don't worry. Put him on my apron and take as many silver coins as you wish." She gave a wicked chuckle. "Of course, if you'd rather have gold, there is a chest of it in the 3rd room," she cackled. "The dog that sits on top of it has eyes as big as round towers. Don't be afraid. Put him on my apron and he won't hurt you. Take as much as you want." "What do you want for yourself?" asked the soldier. "Not a single shilling," the witch said. "All I want is the old
tinderbox my grandmother left down there. You shall have it, cried the soldier. The witch tied a rope firmly round the soldier's body. Tucking her apron into his pocket, he climbed down inside the hollow tree. It seemed a long way down. At last, his feet touched the bottom. 3 doors lay before him. Opening the first door, the soldier looked inside. Just as the witch had said, a dog with eyes as big as teacups sat on top of an old chest. He looked very fierce. "You're a fine fellow," said the soldier bravely. He put the dog on the witch's apron. The chest was full of copper coins. The soldier filled his pockets with them, then put the dog back on top of the chest. In the second room, another dog, with eyes as large as mill wheels, sat on a chest of silver coins. As before, the soldier lifted the dog onto the witch's apron and opened the chest. It was full of silver coins. When he saw them, the soldier threw away the copper coins. He filled his pockets with silver instead. Then he put the dog back. The fiercest dog of all was in the third room. His eyes were as big as round towers, and he sat on a huge chest. The soldier needed all his courage to lift him onto the witch's apron. Then he looked inside the chest. There were so many gold coins that the soldier gasped. He threw away the silver. He filled his pockets, his knapsack, and even his cap with gold. Only then did he put the dog back on the chest. Now the soldier had plenty of money. As he left the third room, he remembered the witch's tinderbox. He put that inside his tunic, along with her blue-checked apron. "Pull me up!" he called up to the witch. She pulled on the rope, and soon the soldier was standing on the road once more. "Where's the tinderbox?" screeched the witch. "Give it to me!" The soldier shook his head. "First of all, tell me why you want it," he said. "I won't!" the witch screamed. "Give it to me at once!" "No," said the soldier. And he killed her with his sword. The soldier set off for the town. It was a splendid place, and now he was rich. He took a room at the very best inn. He ordered the best food and bought new clothes. Soon, he became a fine gentleman and had lots of friends. The soldier's friend told him about a beautiful princess. "Can I see her?" asked the soldier. His friends all shook their heads. "No one ever sees her," they said. It was foretold that she would marry a common soldier. The king and queen wouldn't like that. They keep her locked away in a great castle. "I'd love to see her," thought the soldier. "Perhaps one day I will." Time passed happily. The soldier enjoyed being rich and having lots of friends. But he spent his money so quickly that it was soon almost all gone. He had to leave the inn and live in a dark little attic. None of his friends came to see him. One cold, dark night, he didn't even have a candle to light his room. Then he remembered the tinderbox. He'd seen a small piece of candle inside. He brought out the tinderbox. As soon as he struck a spark from the flint, the door of his room flew open. In came the first dog he'd met down inside the hollow tree. "What are your commands, Lord?" the dog asked. "Bring me some money," cried the soldier. In a flash, the dog vanished. He returned with a bag of copper coins in his mouth. The soldier soon found out what a wonderful tinderbox this was. If he struck the flint once, the dog from the chest of copper coins appeared.
twice, and in came the dog from the chest of silver. 3 times, and in ran the dog from the chest of gold. All 3 would do anything he wanted. "Make me rich again," he cried. He moved back into the inn, ordered the best food once more, and bought new clothes. Late one evening, the soldier sat thinking about the princess, who was locked away in a castle. "I'd love to see her," he thought. Picking up the tinderbox, he struck the flint. In came the first dog. "I know it's very late," the soldier said, "but I would like to see the princess just for a moment." At once, the dog was gone. Before the soldier could blink, the dog came back with the princess on his back. She was fast asleep, and she was so beautiful that the soldier kissed her. Then he told the dog to take her home. Next morning, the princess told the king and queen of a strange dream. "I dreamt that a dog carried me away on his back," she said, "and a soldier kissed me." "This won't do," said the queen firmly. She ordered a court lady to sit in the princess's bedroom all night to see if it really had been a dream. Next night, the soldier again sent the dog for the princess. This time, the court lady followed. She watched the dog take the princess to the inn. With a piece of chalk, she made a big cross on the door. Next morning, the king's men would find the place easily. But the dog was too clever for her. Seeing the cross, he too took a piece of chalk. Soon, he made crosses on doors all over the town. When the king's men came, they'd no idea where to begin looking for the soldier. The queen was clever too. Next night, she fixed a silken bag to the princess's back. It was full of flour and had a tiny hole at the bottom. When the dog came for the princess, the flour trickled out through the hole. It left a trail to the soldier's door. The dog didn't even see it. In the morning, the king's men put the soldier in prison. "Tomorrow you'll hang," said the jailers. All night the soldier sat in his dark cell thinking, how could he escape? The dogs couldn't help, for the tinderbox was at the inn. He'd nothing in his pockets but a few silver coins. In the morning, he looked sadly out through the window. A shoemaker's boy was hurrying past. "Stop!" cried the soldier. He held out the coins from his pocket. "Fetch my tinderbox from the inn, and you shall have these silver coins." The shoemaker's boy had never seen so much money. In no time at all, he had brought the soldier his precious tinderbox. Just then, the jailers hustled him out to be hanged. All the people were there, and the king and queen. The soldier struck the flint of the tinderbox 1, 2, 3 times. At once all 3 dogs appeared. "Help me," said the soldier. The dogs were so fierce that the king's men bolted. The dogs seized the king and queen and ran away with them. They were never seen again. The people cheered the soldier. "Marry our princess," they cried. "Then you shall be our king and queen." And so, the soldier married the princess, which pleased her very much. Their wedding lasted a week, and the 3 dogs were the most important guests at the feast. Goodbye, dog. He loves that story, you know. Especially the last bit, about the 3 dogs being the most important guests at the wedding. It's nearly time for us to go too. But remember, you can look at the pictures and read the stories of the Tinderbox and Cinderella for yourselves. Or ask somebody you like to read them to you, like I did. And whenever you're in Kent, you can come and visit Item Moat. Really, I mean, not by magic. Which reminds me, I must have a word with that person doing your magic. Oh, really? That's just showing off! Now, do be good children and stay in the same place just for a minute. All this appearing and disappearing is making me quite dizzy. Oh, dear. It's lovely here. But I've got to go. Otherwise, I shall be late for my next lot of children. No peace for good socks. Bye. Bear? Where have you got to? Come here this minute. Well, honestly, what am I going to do with you? You can't get up in the mornings, and the moment my back's turned, you're up to all kinds of mischief. Yes, I know they were very nice children, and you would have liked to stay and play with them. Yes, perhaps you can another time. No, I can't actually promise. I don't know how you expect me to get my work done with you around. Really, I don't. It's no wonder my magic's not what it was. You're quite impossible. You know that.